One, two. Testing one, two. Testing one, two. Where's my phone? Testing one, two. Testing one, two.
Hello, two. Hello, hello. Okay, I think it's a little bit better. We might need. Hello. Oh, hey, Konje. I'm a road. I like to move around. No, Kelvin, I'm just making sure gore batho ba fihla ba tla dula ra, so that they don't disturb the site. So yeah, let's 1, 2. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think let's kick off. Thank you for joining us. It's now 13 minutes past 6, so we apologize for starting off late. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to do something a little bit different today in opening the session. I'd just like us to take just a moment of silence for 30, 40 seconds. Just want you to close your eyes, put down your phones, iPads, step into the room, kind of leave the workplace, the traffic that you endured coming here. Just indulge us and just take a moment of silence. Thank you very much for that. So, one of the reasons I wanted to open the session in that way was that today we are having a very important conversation, and welcome to you all to this policy gathering of Rise Mzansi. My name is Tebogo Mwalusi. I'm the national spokesperson of Rise Mzansi. But I just wanted us to get into the room. I think sometimes we come into the room ready with a mission to try and be overly intelligent and to try to be too smart. But I think the topic today is something that touches all our lives and touches on a significant number of South Africans who are continuously facing an increasing cost of living. Just a few days ago, the Daily Maverick posted an article which shifted my universe. I don't know if it shifted yours if you read it, but it was about Ubongega Buso. I don't know if you guys know the name, but Ubongega is a 38-year-old Black African woman from Butterworth. Bongega proceeded to kill 3 of her children and then herself after what was discovered to be a difficulty in dealing with the cost of living and hunger. She no longer could live in a world where her children could be hungry. And the only option that she thought was viable for her and her family and her children was to kill them. And so she put rat poison in their food as their last supper. And she had a tussle allegedly with her daughter of 13 years old. I guess that daughter was trying to prevent this moment from happening. And to that extent, she came to her demise with a knife to the neck. And Bongega then hung herself in the Rondavo and wrote a letter to explain why she had done that. So, as we sit in this room and we are going to talk about these concepts and these ideas, this idea of why is the cost of living in South Africa so high? I don't want us to be too intellectual. I think intellectual debate and engagement is important, and we invite it because I think part of the Rise Mzansi journey is to elevate the type of politics that we currently have. But I don't want us to miss the point of why we are here and what we are solving for. There are just way too many people who experience violence in this country, way too many people who are hungry, too many people without jobs, particularly young people, people with disabilities, people living in rural settings. So when we talk about the cost of living being high, we all represent stories of people who live that reality on a daily basis. And that's what makes this. So that's the context that brings us here. And this is our third policy gathering. And these conversations are about Rise Mzansi wanting to listen as part of this process of thinking more intently about what is the South Africa we want to reimagine and then craft going into the elections in 2024. In terms of housekeeping, I think you would have seen some of the bathrooms as you walked in, but I'm not going to go into the rules because I think we're all adults. We know you can move, and let's respect people. Let's contribute as much as we can. But the important one is let us contribute as human beings, as professionals in the space. These conversations can be difficult to access and therefore very intimidating for certain people. And it's important that we elevate the discussion, and we can talk, technical aspects. And I think there's people in the room who can engage that content. But I think what we would like to get to is why would Bongega do what she did? And how many women in this month that we are happy to call Happy Women's Month, I don't know if there's much to be happy about when you look at the conditions under which women live in this country, So it's important for us to have this conversation and let's deal with the problems, but let's also start thinking about what kind of solutions we'd want to present. What should we be thinking about the intersectionalities that start to unravel and really accelerate us to moments of solving for some of the simple but yet very significant problems that face the people of this country. That's what politics is about. It's about how do you exercise your proximity to office, power, influence, and resource in order to advance the interest of those who do not have privilege and access. How do we serve people? How does our type of leadership and our posture of politics present itself in a way that deals with the relevant issues of this country? We are trying to move away from a politics of arrogance that assumes that we know the answers, a politics that is highly intellectualized, that looks at statistics without thinking about the lived experiences of those who are affected by those numbers. That's the real politics. That's why you are here. So we thank you for joining us. What you can expect today is, I've just done a brief opening, but our national leader, Songezo Zibi, will, I guess, craft the problem statement a little bit more succinctly. And really share with you what we would like to pull out of this conversation. If you're expecting a policy discussion where we present our 5 pillars that are going to save the country by 2026, you are in the wrong room, unfortunately. But most certainly, we would like to give you the opportunity to share your lived experience around the high cost of living and how we can coordinate our efforts to better respond to them, not only for ourselves, but for those who represent the different communities that we come from. We obviously have got some people online. We are streaming live on various social media platforms, so we will do our best to take inputs and questions from that platform. We are due to have an input from Mandla. Mandla Isaacs is our head of policy at Rise Mzansi. So we will check whether our technical ability and capabilities allows us for him to share a word or two. But we don't want to talk too long up here. We want to open up the space for us to have this conversation as much as possible.
Tedza, am I on now? I'm going to assume that I'm live. Good evening, everyone. I'm connecting with you virtually from Johannesburg. Thank you, Tevza, for that introduction and grounding us in the very real reality of how difficult life is for so many of our people. Um, just to share, I think, at the high level, in terms of our reality, South Africa, as we know, is an extremely unequal country, in as much as some of our citizens are lucky enough to enjoy very high living standards and access to things like education, health, and the comforts of life. You know, the many South Africans are battling. In fact, the government's own statistics, I think in 2018, shared that about half of South Africans live in poverty, and another quarter, or almost 1 in 4 South Africans, are threatened by poverty. So, really, 3 out of 4 South Africans have it quite difficult. And it's not to say that the rest, those that are lucky enough to be in the middle class, don't have challenges. But the vast majority of South Africans either live in poverty or are, a few steps away from poverty, whether that's losing a job, a health challenge, or having to care for family members. So I think this conversation around the cost of living is extremely apt. We're coming off a decade where the economy hasn't grown, unemployment has risen, and it's extremely difficult for many of our people. And as Rise and Zanzi, I would just say that our values and our political principles are fundamentally organized around the idea of social democracy, which says we believe every South African should be able to fulfill their basic needs, uh, ideally through work or economic activity. But if not, then we as the community, as society, through the state, want to step in. And Songezo is going to unpack this a bit more. So I think when we talk about the South Africa we deserve, we want a South Africa in which everyone is able to flourish, everyone is able to prosper, but most importantly, everyone is able to fulfill their basic needs and achieve access the basics of advancement and social mobility, whether it's education, work, training. And so, just right now, we're really trying to zoom in at a human level on the day to day, how people are able to go about their lives. Are they able to even get a foothold towards stability and ultimately to live a dignified and decent life? So, it's a vital conversation, and just very appreciative to be in conversation with you today and to hear your perspectives about the very real challenges you're dealing with, that you're assisting your families and friends to deal with, and to co-create and collectively start to move towards solutions over the next few weeks as we move towards our People's Manifesto convention. So thank you very much.
That was Mandla Isaacs, our head of policy at Rise Mzansi, just sharing a few words before Songezo Zibi comes onto the podium. Our vision statement says that we want to build the South Africa we deserve. That South Africa is one which is safe. It is a South Africa that is prosperous. It's a South Africa that is equal and united in one generation. That's it. That's the promise. That's the aspiration. And so when we sit and have these conversations, it is to continue to test and or validate that statement, whether or not it still meets the threshold of shifting South Africa to where we need to be. On that note, Mr. Zibi, if you can join us, thank you.
Yeah, it's quite like a service. And I know there are some of our people, of our leaders. I was going to start with our slogan, but I also know there are people who don't, who are guests at the same time. So I'll do that right at the end. after I have made my contribution. So, good evening. Debs has taken the words right out of my mouth. By the way, the reason I'm wearing a jacket today is because we are close to the seat of government, and there are people who come from embassies and so on. So I thought I should look respectable today. And so when I got here, one of our colleagues, no, it was him. He walked right past me. He didn't recognize me in my jacket, and then he said, "Oh, it's you." But today is a very serious topic tonight. So the story that Deboho told, it's actually a place I know. I don't know how many of you have been to the Eastern Cape and driven past Butterworth, but the very last village before you get to the Kai River cuttings, the very last one, that village is Tolin. I have a couple of friends who grew up there in the 1970s and 80s, and it is the same place where there was a serial killer who was killing women at night. He would rape them and then hack them with an axe. It's a desperately poor and deprived community. And the story that Debs told, the incident happened a week after our national organizer and I, Makashule Ghana, had been to that part of the world, or at least next door to KSD and Christiani municipalities. And I will share something that you all know. So our style is to have a conversation in the community. And so we were doing that in the places to which we went. And one of the things I've personally learned is that you kind of need to ask a lot more questions than you speak. And so people will say they need jobs, but when you ask further, you realize that what people really need is food. And so we would speak a lot about hunger, about indlala in isiXhosa, and people would first look down, a little bit ashamed, but eventually people would open up, and people would talk about the fact that they usually have one meal a day, and that the children don't usually cry anymore because they're becoming used to the deprivation. And in my contribution today, I will share some statistics in as accessible a way as possible from Stats SA. Because sometimes, and one of the things we're trying to avoid here is to look at problems in the same way that the ANC and I think South Africa as a whole have looked at them before, so that we begin to target very specific problems. So we have a ministry and a strategy for everything, but we actually do not have a plan for tackling hunger in South Africa. We don't have a deliberate objective to eliminate hunger, say within 5 years, or to say we want every family to have 3 full healthy meals a day within 5 years, regardless of level of income. If we set ourselves that objective, we begin to think more clearly and in a focused way about how we're going to tackle that problem. Because when you just talk about rural development, it's any of 120 things that you could talk about. And so in my contribution today, I will try and just get into some of the weeds a little bit so that we have an understanding of the kind of conversation I would like us to have. So this is not a presentation about how we lower the cost of living. We are going to have that conversation. I am going to ask some questions. I'm going to offer some information, and I'm going to offer some opinions of mine, but let us have the conversation. And there will be a microphone going around so that we can talk. We can have a proper discussion. But this is one of the reasons that values, principles, and choices are important politically. That we we have chosen social democratic values because they, not only because they reflect the values of our constitution, but particularly because they're built around a caring society where we are each other's keeper. We are each other's keeper. It is not just the government. When we understand the government to be a representation of the people, then we begin to think about the issues a little differently. So the example of Tshwane village is important in that context, because what I'd like us to think about, and let's have the discussion afterwards, what cost of living is when you have no money. What is cost of living when you have no money? You don't have a cent. Everything is expensive for you. There is no case where there is something that is cheaper than the other. You do not have the money. So let us think about how we solve that problem. But I'm just going to offer some information. So 2 days ago, Statistics South Africa released, they call it the quarterly labor force survey, but it's where we learn about unemployment and employment and so on. And I'm reading directly from the release. They say of the 7.9 million unemployed people in the second quarter of this year, half of them did not have matric. And 40.2% of them just had matric only. Now let us talk about people that don't have matric, because we can then, start making some assumptions. So let me offer some information. About 27%, at least in the Eastern Cape. So I'll keep making examples about the Eastern Cape because I'm from there, so you'll forgive me. I know it a little bit better than a few other places in the country. 27 of those kids, despite the availability of the feeding scheme, are stunted. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough nutrition. And when you don't have enough food, it is really difficult to concentrate at school and develop and study all the way through to matric. And so that is why there are young people who do not complete their matric studies. So we've got to think about how we solve that problem. I'll offer some further examples of what stands in people's way. But I'm mentioning these because if we don't talk about the experiences of people, we're always going to try and have the clever discussion about, what policy should be and so on. And at the end of the day, politics has got to be about people's experiences and how we make those experiences better. If we are honest, and let us not, try and be clever here, very few people read manifestos and then decide on the basis of that manifesto that this is who I'm going to vote for. It is something that people want to argue and be clever on Twitter and Facebook do. But even them, they don't read the whole thing. They read other tweets. So let us have the discussion about how we make life for all South Africans better. Let's do that, and not try and be too clever in this way. So we've chosen cost of living as a topic tonight because we're trying to bring the discussion about the political economy to life. It's easy to try and be clever and talk about the Reserve Bank and talk about Treasury and all of these kind of things. It gives us the impression that we're talking about solutions. We are not. We're talking to ourselves. We're trying to sound smart to the next person. Those things are really, really important. But what I'm trying to say is we've got to bring these things to the level of care. So let me offer some information I've come across in preparing for today, that something called the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute says the average South African needs to earn about 7,911 rand per month in order to have a decent standard of living, like to have a decent life. Now, that's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, but it gives you an example of how much most people do not have, because most South Africans, by the way, do not earn more than 5,000 rand. Most South Africans don't earn more than 5,000 rand. Most South Africans don't have a permanent job or even a semi-permanent job in order to be able to live a decent life. And some of the necessities that make up a decent life include a solid house with electricity, water, a flush toilet, a meat or fish equivalent every day, or someone to look after your children, after you when you are ill, a permanent job or regular income, and a grown-up to look after your children who are under 10 when you are not at home. You need to have street lights and so on. Now, I'm from a village, so a lot of the things are actually just not there. So, in fact, I want us to just think about something. So someone who's got to go and draw water from a communal tap in the morning versus somebody who's got water in the house. You get ready and you've got a geyser and all of these kind of things. You get ready for work. Like it takes you like an hour shorter if you have those things in your house than somebody who lives in a village who's got to go and fetch the water. They've got to boil the water. They've got to like prepare, and then before they leave, they've got to go and fetch some water so that there's water while they're not there. Now forget about a flush toilet and these kind of things. They are not there. So let's think about the fact that even when people don't have to pay for these things because they don't have them, rates and so on, they still don't earn enough money. It still doesn't go far enough in any case. So what we've got to do, I believe, is to try and think about how we change people's daily experiences in that way so that they have these basic necessities. Now, what do South African families look like? So about 14% of South African families have 6 people or more each. About 11% have 5, 16% have 4. So that means about 41% have between 4 and 6 people or more. Now let's go back to what I said earlier to say most households don't earn 8,000 Rand a month. So that means it's really difficult to feed people 3 meals a day in each family. That's the situation in our country. And so cost of living, and I think that there's an appreciation in the room that cost of living is not something that we should just see in the context of people who live just here, maybe in Hatfield or Sunnyside and Centurion and so on, but places where that have got these amenities like flush toilets and that sort of thing. Most South Africans, a lot of South Africans don't actually have this. I saw a statistic I do not believe in one of State SA's documents to say about 79 or 82% of South Africa has access to sanitation. I thought, no ways. No ways. I come from OR Tambo district. It's bigger than Gauteng. Like flush toilets are accessible to like 8-9% of households. There is no, like the only sewage works in KSDs in Mthatha. If in Mkanduli where I come from, there is nothing like that. Those who've got flush toilets use septic tanks and so. So I don't believe that statistic, but it's there. So let's talk about income. Now, one of the things we hear often, and it's true, is that South Africa is a very unequal society. Now, South Africa has got very wealthy people, very, very wealthy people. South Africa has got a lot of inherent wealth in it. The problem also is there are too many people who don't earn an income at all because they don't have a job. Because it is also not possible to start a business or to do other things. So let me give an insight. So where Madiba grew up, not where he was born, where he grew up in Mqhekezweni, it's not far from Kun. So I know the chief from there, Zwelitobi. So thugs come at night and barge into people's homes and they threaten to rape the women if they don't pay them money. Sometimes, even when the people pay the money, they still rape them. You can Google it on your phone if you have time. It's true. It happens. You can check it on Twitter and Facebook. You'll see lots of comments about it. Here's the problem with that situation. Many of the households are headed by women. So when you want to work the land, you've got to leave your home and go. I mean, our own sort of a mealie field at home is about 1.5 kilometers away. You must go there alone as a woman. you are going to get raped or something is going to happen to you. You must not be shy about this thing. So even when people have got land, they still cannot get access to that land to use it because of crime from within the community. The first time I wrote a book, I wrote about the first time I experienced, I witnessed a rape. I was about 8 years old. I did not realize what was going on. Luckily, the lady was able to run away and left a little kid like this. She went to draw water from the river, and there was a guy wearing a red Adidas tracksuit waiting for her there. This is our society. So even when people are trying to make ends meet, it becomes difficult for them to do so. So what I'm trying to say, when Debza spoke about a national mission that we are on, and the reason that ours needs to be more than just a political party is that there's so much that we've got to turn around and change in our own communities, and not just say this is a job for the government, because the changing these things also needs very deep reflection within communities about how we do not prevent people from being able to make a living. We also need to ditch the terminology we like GBV. It's really as bad as saying rural development, because it doesn't tell you anything. But I'm describing this in a graphic way because it's really people's experiences. So there are obstacles in the way of people in making a decent life for themselves and getting food and that sort of thing. Now, we're going to get to the big stuff as well. So I'm not here to say people in villages are the problem to themselves, but I just want us to have an appreciation of why we must try and think about things which are going to work. I think part of the reason people don't vote at all is because you go there and you talk about rural development, and yet the experiences of people is what I have just described. I also wouldn't vote. You're not reflecting my life experience at all. So why would I be interested? Now, people in other environments have got their versions of experience, but Debza's provocation was kind of took me there because it's an area that I was born in, that I grew up with, and it is the reason in my heart that I'm part of Rise Mzansi and I'm doing what I'm doing. Because if we don't have this kind of conversation and it's a political conversation, nothing will change. Nothing will change. Nothing will change. And we'll always look for leadership with no names and no faces, because we have been told that we are nothing, we are not good enough to change our conditions ourselves, including the country as a whole. So the number one expense, therefore, for most families in South Africa is for food. The number one expense for most families is for food. I know there are people with home loans. I also have one. There are people with cars. I also have a car loan. But for most people, it's food. So let me give you an idea. In the year between February 2021 and February last year, bread flour, sunflower oil, onions, and so on went up by nearly 40% in 1 year. So now imagine you don't have a job, you've got a piece job, or you have no work at all, and those basic needs have gone up by 40% in 12 months. Life becomes even more difficult. And then add to that the rate of increase in things like paraffin and soap. Paraffin and soap went up by over 40% in that same period, and those prices continue to go up. So if you earn less than 5,000 per month, cost of living for you is the difference between hunger and survival. There are instances when even when people have a job, the expense of going to the job is so much that the job is not worth it. We don't appreciate that. My cousin lived with me when I just started working. She used to work for a lending institution in Port Elizabeth. And if she wasn't living with me, she wasn't going to be able to afford the rent because of how little she was getting paid. So she could have that job and do one or two things because she was. Now, and this is where we then have the conversation about what the minimum or living wage needs to be so that people can live a decent life. because some of the conversations we've got to have is what people earn and what is a morally correct wage to pay people. When you understand what the cost of living in a country is, there are lots of people in South Africa who earn enough money just to go to work. And therefore, in effect, they are slaves. They are slaves in reality because they earn just enough to go to work. But let's also talk about the people who live a little bit of a better life, who also have normalized paying for things that South Africans should not be paying for because we already pay for them. And that is the people who pay for private schooling for their kids. We shouldn't be taking children to private schools as a necessity. It should be people who want some or other special thing then for their kids to pay money to take them to private school. But some people pay for private schooling. If you don't have medical aid in South Africa, you are really in trouble. And guess what? Over 90% of South Africans, or close to 90% of South Africans, do not have medical aid. So, but we shouldn't be needing medical aid to begin with. We should have a health system that provides adequate medical treatment for everyone. So South Africans on top of that have to pay to go to a doctor. In fact, where I come from, the hospital you go to is Tshwane Hospital. It wasn't a bad hospital until the union started messing it up. It's Tshwane Hospital. So you go, let's say you go towards Centurion, like 40 kilometers that way. And then you get there, they decide, no, you're a bit of a more serious case. You actually need to go to Hammanskraal. So sometimes the system is so broken that people spend money then to avoid the referral system and go in the opposite direction for themselves. Now, we talk about cost of living. What I'm trying to say is the way even in government we think about these things, we think about them in a way that takes the little money that people have in their pockets and we take it away. And then we make them pay on top of having paid tax. Even if you don't work, you pay tax because that's what VAT is. So let me just, as I go towards the questions I'd like us to answer in the room, to also talk about the things that make everything else expensive. So whenever the Reserve Bank, about 1.5 kilometers from here, increases interest rates, a lot of us in the middle class will, on Twitter, there'll be a very hectic conversation about how damaging this is. And that's because of the cost of borrowing thereof, because if you are paying X amount on your home loan, it obviously increases. So I know because I've got a home loan that is not fully paid up. So I know how painful that is. But part of the reason is some of the failures in the government itself and the way that the government works. So let me give some examples. One of the biggest drivers or causes of price increases is load shedding and the price of electricity. Is load shedding and the price of electricity. Why? Because retailers and other businesses have to buy diesel. They don't buy that diesel. You do. You buy that diesel. You pay for that diesel. Farmers say the same thing. We spoke to a farmer in Limpopo who said they use about 450 liters of diesel a week. Electricity, and we know there's a fight about this, never goes up by lower than about 19-20%. It's always more, right? Inflation is the rate at which prices increase. So electricity goes up, at least for Eskom. Then municipalities put their own tariff on top of that one. Now, if you come from the municipality where my mother lives, which is KSD, you don't have any rates revenue because nothing else works, so they don't collect. The electricity increase that gets charged of residents is on top of Eskom. The Ruth Mompati municipality some years ago was marking up electricity by 81%. And so that gets passed on to everybody so that we pay for it. So that's one example. The other example is Transnet. If anyone who's driven to Durban recently, you will see all the trucks along the road because the trains don't work anymore at Transnet. So companies that used to ship things to South Africa and then put them on a train have to fly things to South Africa, then put them on a truck. Guess who pays for that? We pay for that. Then we pay for that. So let me ask some questions, therefore, for us to have a discussion about. And I will start with a message that Mandla sent me, because I didn't take the train trip, but he did. So he took a train trip to Naledi in May, and the trip was the trip to Naledi was from Park Station was 8 rand 50 cents, which meant that coming back it's 17 rand. One way with a taxi was 22 rand. So one of the things I want us to think about, because we don't associate it with cost of living, what we call public transport is not public transport. A taxi is not owned by the public, it's owned by someone. It's a private business. It's expensive. It is unsafe. And we must be honest, guys, those guys are particularly rough with black women. They're particularly abusive to black women. So you pay more, it's unsafe, and you're abused. And you pay money you don't have. And because of the way that apartheid spatial planning happened, is that the less money you have, the further away you live from where you work, which means you spend more than the people who earn more than you to get to work to earn very little income. So we've got to think about how we change that, and let's have that conversation here today. Because there should be government buses, there should be government trains that are well run, that are efficient, and the money that we pay is just enough to cover the cost of running and maintaining these things quite well. You will start seeing something else happening. The traffic on the roads will start to decrease. So here's the other thing that then causes costs to go up. A friend of mine is an entrepreneur, so he started he's younger than me actually, he started a business of delivering small parcels with scooters. So eventually he decided this business is just not viable because of load shedding and things. There's so much traffic that he's not making the number of deliveries per day that he needs to. So I must increase the price. Guess what it means? A person who's receiving the parcel or sending the parcel has got to pay more. So there are all of these things that are caused by how poorly the government is run and how the old way in which we think about things, that we make people pay for things that they shouldn't have to pay for. So I've spoken about a decent living wage, minimum wage. That's important. So I've spoken about that. Let's talk about how we solve some of the big problems, such as what I've said about the rate at which electricity increases. Let us say we were to make a decision that within 5 years or 10 years, every solid home in South Africa will have rooftop panels, so that people don't have to buy electricity they can't afford. Forget what Eskom is. In fact, let's change Eskom's mandate or alter it and say part of what they've got to do together with municipalities to make sure that every home has got rooftop solar. It changes a lot of things. It creates jobs, it creates other opportunities, but it also means what you pay for electricity is less than what you do now. So I've spoken about that. The third thing I want us to talk about, can we, in this conversation, talk about specific problems? Let's leave the fancy language out, please. Rural development and all of these things. Let's talk about hunger. Let's talk about lack of safety and all of these kind of things. The things that we pay for that we should not have to pay as much as we do for, and what we do about them. Let's have that kind of conversation. Let us talk about how poorly run municipalities are a cost burden on people, especially poor people. Because when a municipality is run very badly, I saw in the same statistical release from Stats SA saying that I think they are refuse collection. But then they've written in small print that in the majority of cases, the refuse collection is done by the community themselves. Okay. It's like, it's not true. So again, people pay for something that they shouldn't have to pay for in that way. It should be a collective responsibility where we pay for it, because it's the difference between living in healthy and unhealthy conditions. Where I grew up, the cleanliness of the environment in which you live says a lot about how much you respect yourself and you respect others, but also how your politicians and your political system respect you. If you are made to live within dirt and filth, there is no respect for you. And guess what? You are made to pay for it on top of it. And the last thing I want to talk about is why we need a different politics and we need a different government. That is important. What we have been told is that in politics, a political party must tell you all the solutions. That the politicians must tell you all the solutions. When you're not clever enough, they must tell you everything. That's false, because becoming a politician one day does not instantly make you clever. It doesn't, and we know it. So let us take charge of our country and think about these things properly. There is a lot that we can change in how we think and understand what a basic service and a basic right is. And we ask ourselves, how can we have a political system that delivers all of those things? It doesn't mean we do nothing and we sit. It just means we have collectively decided to use our government to deliver to deliver that. Thank you very much, Debs. So let's have the conversation.
Thank you very much, Songezo Ziwi. I'd like to welcome Mrs. Vuisa Ramkhopa, our national chairperson. You're welcome. And thank you for the address. I think it shapes the conversation. So we have about an hour and maybe just a little bit over that for us to start having a conversation. There will be a roving mic, and you can speak to some of the questions that Songezo has raised, but you're also welcome to raise any other ideas or topics or questions that you would like the room to consider. I think the idea is not to walk out with an exhaustive list of things to solve the world, but certainly to walk out feeling like we've made a contribution to shift us forward. The only thing I will request is that we try to keep our contributions brief. We sometimes have a challenge with people who go a little bit over the time limit. So when I walk towards you, please know that that is a sign that we would like you to wrap up your comment. That's the only rule. Outside of that, let us contribute. So in that vein, let me see a show of hands of people who'd like to make a comment, question, contribution, whichever format that it takes. I'll note a question there or a contribution there. Anybody else? Okay, let's start with that to get warm. Hopefully we will get a little bit more courageous as we go along. Please just state your name, and if you come from an organization, you're welcome to share the organization as well.
Dumela. So by the name Kagiso Khomane, I'm from an organization called For the Youth by the Youth. I'm the founder of that organization. We've been running the organization since 2018. So 2021 and 2022, we happened to run a course in 3 provinces. So the courses that we were running, it was business administration, and then we were also running project management. So what we also did is that we realized that most of young people in South Africa, they lack skills. So what we did, we were giving them the seeds to plow in their homes. So I think that is something that we can also try to implement just to ensure that we alleviate poverty. Because if we have young people and families doing this, it will reduce poverty, because some of the things that we buy, we are able to grow in our homes. So it's one of the contributions that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Kagiso. Before you sit down, I just maybe 2 follow-up questions to you. Where is that program today? And can you describe to us how it did change people's lives as you kind of anecdotally share that story?
Okay, the program is no longer existing, but what we do is that we still check the students that we had. So even up to date, they are still doing it. They are still like growing food in their homes. So even this year, we'll be meeting with them just to check the progress of where they are. So it happened. It happened that they graduated last year, 28th October. So this year we are running a career exhibition, just to give them opportunities. Those who are still unemployed. So yeah, you guys are more than welcome to come and meet these young people. So we will be expecting a number of 200 young people.
Last question from me. If there's anything that you think would help that program survive, flourish, expand, scale, what would that be?
Venues in most cases, because if we can get venues to train these young people, we can be able to do that. Because I don't think that we need more money, because some of the things to buy, they don't cost that much, because the seeds, we were spending 20 rand to buy seeds, and then through those seeds we were able to contribute to 10 students. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Kagiso. Yeah, any questions, any comments? Anybody else would like to go? Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bitumelo Mashakeng. I'm from an organization called Watupanda Community Forum. We are from the informal settlement of Amanda Park in Mamelodi. So you've touched a serious issue in terms of food, because where we live, let's say as Watupanda, we are an NPO that help gender-based violence victims and you find that there are many women who are struggling with food, but we can't even help those women because we also don't have funding because of the red tape that the government have put in terms of us accessing funding. When we want funding, they'll tell us we want the rezoning, and we are in the informal settlement. So there are so many red tape. So I feel as an individual that for us to be able to help each other as the community, we need to come up with programs, entrepreneurship programs that are going to help people at the local level. Because if you say you want to give me a job and then I come here at town, I spend 2,000 rand to come here at town, but then I can do the same job. Maybe I work at an internet cafe. I can work at an internet cafe where I stay and still make the same amount of money, and I don't have to spend for transport. So I think the most important thing is for the government to come and empower people at the local level through entrepreneurship. As he was talking about the issue of agriculture, I can attest to it. We also do vegetable gardens and stuff, and it really helps. We're able to help other families through that. And if the program continues, it becomes a continuous program, then we will be able to help more people. And then the issue of GBV as well. I believe for GBV equals people are hungry. If I'm a mother of maybe 3 children staying with my husband, he's not working, obviously we're going to fight for little food that are in the house. And that also, when we deal with issues of GBV, most of the time you find that people are fighting over little things because there's no food, there's no money, there's no jobs. So I think if maybe the real emphasis should be in entrepreneurship, whereby young people are trained to start doing things themselves, to start sewing, to start doing whatever is it that they can do in order for them to sustain themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Itumelo. Thank you for that. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's warm up. There's one on the side, and whilst he gets ready, there's somebody who's gonna follow. Okay, not yet.
Good evening. My name is Figile. I'm with Soshanguve Youth Business Forum. Yeah, our forum wants to, or it intend to try to help young people to become entrepreneurs, and also to create a culture where we don't depend on jobs. We try to create our own jobs. But the challenge that we are facing as we are talking about the cost of living, firstly, to start a business is costly. There are certain things that you cannot access because of you don't have. I will make an example. When we started a forum in 2014, the idea was there is these projects that are coming in our areas, and obviously the projects we are told or taught that they must leave 30%, and that's where, as a community, we will fight for that 30%. So we decided to start a forum to say, let's approach those contractors so that they can also share the piece of a pie to young people. But I stay in Soshanguve. Somewhere 2017, to get in a project, it's either you must have a gun or you must belong to a gang, because they will hijack those projects. So as a young man who doesn't have either, you are unable to participate in those projects. So I agree that it's either the government is changed or we change leaders in the community, because those that are leading us now, they are not treating us fairly in terms of giving us opportunities. Secondly, I think the cost of living, in some areas, it's deliberately orchestrated. Why am I saying that? I stayed in Hammanskraal for 2 years. In Hammanskraal, certain areas, to drink healthy water, you must buy it. So it's a cost that has been deliberately orchestrated by certain people, because if they get water, someone is not going to get a tender to deliver water with those water tanks. So they will try by all means to stop projects that are taking water to Hammanskraal so that a certain individual can benefit. So again, I'm saying certain cost of living, they are created for us to suffer so that we can give more out of what we don't have. My other input is that on the 30th of June, we had a dialogue in Soshanguve. The theme was business and politics. We invited young people all across Soshanguve, 16 wards. We attracted 100 young people, and we realized that we have a problem because young people, they don't believe in entrepreneurship. We go to school to be employed. So if we were going to school to start our businesses, I believe that someone spoke about chain value in that dialogue. And when he said it, he said, as Soshanguve, we can be able to produce, share the rent among ourselves. So I believe, again, as a forum, we are trying to say, as a community, if we manage to get a rent in Soshanguve, let's make sure it doesn't go out. But we also need help, because facilities are, they are gatekeepers, if I may say so. In the 8 years of existence, knocking at the NYDA doors, we only managed to get them this year. And we changed the approach. We had to be aggressive to get them. So again, those agencies that are available for young people, they are not even there for young people in the communities. Why am I saying that? See, the first time coming in Soshanguve, me knowing is this year, called by Soshanguve Business Forum. So again, calling young people for entrepreneurship, young people, they don't respond because they are dependent on the government. We did another project with NYDA, job preparedness. The reason they came is because we said, bring your CV. Department of Labor will be there. 400 young people to 500, they came. Till today, NYDA has not responded to those young people. There are certain CVs that are not even drafted well. So I'm thinking, now, the cost of living is deliberately orchestrated so that those who are on the ground, they can become the slaves of the ones that are on the higher level. Lastly, when I realized that I can't bury myself, we are talking about the cost of living. Even the cost of burial, it's something else. I live in a family where we are 6, 7. I'm forced to leave my house because I can't afford my family. You get home, your mother is not working, your father is not working, all are not working. And we have a system. That will be my last input for now.
Thank you, Figile. Before you lose the mic, I just want to ask you some questions. Drug abuse has come up often as an issue in communities. I'd just like you to reflect on kind of how drug abuse is affecting the youth, particularly because they don't have jobs and an opportunity to express themselves. The second question I want to ask you, Figile, is it's often kind of seen that young people have got money to buy alcohol, to go to events, to party, to do all of these fun things. And there's a question about how is it that young people are funding this lifestyle in these areas that we believe are supposed to not have money in those communities? Are you able to share a reflection around that?
Yeah, let me start about drug abuse. In Soshanguve, those who are addicts, we call them cheese boys. They don't lack money because drugs are expensive. So I don't think that they are caused to go to drugs because of they are unemployed. They go to drugs because of maybe they don't have anything to do with their money. They are dependent, they get funding from their parents. But the problem is that those who are able, they will addict or 10 others that are not able to fund themselves to be addict. And once they are addict, they will have to steal to support their addiction. So my take there again is that if we've got activities for young people, if we sell a dream of entrepreneurship, if we sell a dream of owning businesses, if we sell a dream of working for yourself, it is doable. So I think even those young people who have money to buy drugs, they will spend their money on doing something. Because I was having a conversation with somebody. He likes partying and he has a business that doesn't even have a logo. And I said to him, why do you spend 1,000 in a pub, whereas you can spend a 500 for a logo, business card, and everything? And he said, I just want to be part of the lifestyle. So I'm saying in drug addict, if young people have activities, if young people see a purpose of why they must attend such dialogues, then they will go. Yes, of course, we call them for a dialogue of business, they don't come. We call them for Maporisa, they come. And they spend a lot of money. So I'm saying they get bored because of entrepreneurship is not in their system. But if it was in their system from school, basic education, I believe that when they grow, they will believe that they can have businesses. In my time when I was in school, the teacher that I don't like that much normally told us that don't do mathematics because you can't be a doctor. Have you seen what in this location? You can't do that. You must be a teacher. Or so the system again has barricaded us to believe that the only thing we can achieve is 1, 2, 3, 4. And whatever we can achieve, it will never cost us but the government. But if we were taught that things they cost us, we will definitely do something for ourselves. The second question, can you ask it again and I will...
No, you covered it as answering.
Thank
It
you,
was
sir.
just about, the lifestyle element and where young people are getting the money to go and party or you want to answer it?
No. That's the last input.
Okay.
On the lifestyle, our role models are doing it. I used to belong in a party where a former president of that party introduced Louis Vuitton's what stuff. So every youth leader in that party, they would want to become like him. And it's costly to become like him. So they must do something or steal money so that they set the standard. Yesterday we were talking about our councillors, and somebody said our councillors are celebrities. They are our Jesus. Our councillors, they are inaccessible. You make an appointment to see them. And that culture was brought by our leaders. And I agree again that a change of leaders that wants to serve people instead of becoming celebrities, they will also help in our community.
Thank you, Figile. Let's keep it going. Next question, next contribution. I see you have a mic. Do you want to go, bud? Yeah. Whilst you stand,
it's fine.
you'll go. Okay. Just before you speak, Prof. Nick Benedal, I want you to prepare a contribution around the consciousness of big business. One of the issues that has been raised has been kind of what is the role of big business in making and creating opportunities for communities? How should we be talking to big business in them realigning themselves to deal with some of the core issues that we're facing? So as the gentleman stands up to speak, perhaps if you can prepare to share that. Awudi, go ahead.
Legaye?
Shabuzet.
Yeah, evening everyone. I'm Mr. Koza from Mamelodi, 100. Because I came but because of I'm a leader. And la tata ka lefase la rona. Yeah, I'm very jealous, in fact, ka South Africa. So, point ya ka ashi, I'm an activist of the community. So we are facing challenges in our community, whereby surrounding in Kalinen, there is a mines. There is a mines, like there's a diamond mines and other mines. So as an activist of the community, we see there is the young people that they are not working surrounding our community. So it become a challenge for us as a community leaders. So we started to approach the mines. So when we approach the mines for mines to plow back to their community, especially to plow back for the community, especially for to empower women and youth. You understand? So when we go there and ask minds to give the young people a skill, so we're facing a challenge that they are demanding a lot of things, like to register like the companies, or they require something like, if maybe I need a job opportunity, maybe I got only a CK and then and a B and other stuff. So when we go there as a youth, we need like an tenders or a job opportunities or a skill development that they can develop our youth in our area, especially those that they are not working. So we are facing this kind of a challenge whereby they demanding, like they can tell you that they need a truck, just bring us a truck, and then it has the opportunity. And when we need for them to plow back to the community, there are boundaries that they said, we can't talk to you. We need a certain group of people, and those people, everyone, we know that in these days, like, we are living in the dangerous life, you understand. So at the end of the day, young people, for them not to get job, we realize that they have a fear. So if we can channel them and teach them how to apply and how to get access to job. So most of us, especially young people, we don't have the information. So it's very important. Like me, I'm old, I got children, but I don't know how to operate in a computer. But my children, he knows how to operate in a computer. So I realized something also in my community, whereby there is the human settlement, whereby we are facing a serious challenge. In a human settlement, I try to organize. There is a lady who was making a teaching in private. So I try to organize those grade 12, 11 to make an the afternoon studies. So I check something, because of those young children, they go to school, but those 2025 upwards, they are not working. So I realize when they apply for jobs, they require some metrics. So when I grew up, I remember there was an adult school, but now I don't know that the adult school, they are still maybe applying or what. If maybe I can get that kind of an information to give them, or also Mzansi, that's just give them, those young people, this information, so that they can know, okay, I can study home or whatsoever, because of they are lazy. And then the challenge of drugs, we got this kind of, can I put it in this way? I'm sorry, maybe special us, our color, in fact. Yeah, so we're facing this challenge. We know that we can't like leave our culture, you see. So young people, they used to influence other young girls or boys when they are from a traditional initiation schools, you understand. when they come back, they don't concentrate in their studies. They started to disrespect their parents. And then at the end of the day, when they disrespect their parents, it comes to the point where I'm a father, I need to understand. So at the end of the day, me o rata ngwana and le nna ka rata ngwana, but I need to show him tsela e right. It's whereby at the end of the day ka mo hae o tlo kreya gore nna ke bolaya mme or mme wa ipolaya or go dirala something. So I be ke nagana gore Mzansi, if maybe they can come with the leaders to split, to identify the plague, because of I know the gender-based violence I hold, but gantši imo mekhukhung, like understand angere, yeah, imo mekhukhung too much. So mekhukhung, if Rising Mzansi aka emphasize to get a land, or understand our government to relocate those people in the human settlement, I believe the services and also the development it will in the right manner when it comes to inflation. Yeah, the electricity, but why really is in yoga and the stuff while but if those people they get relocated and then they get an electricity, even though they are in the human settlement, other way they can get and the temporary electricity whereby they know that they pay. We know that we are living under the tax, but some of the things they are dangerous, especially even if you can hear it, we doesn't even take 3 months without getting in legal connection, someone is dead. And so people, because of they are not working, they are connecting those in legal connection to do what, to get something in their tables, to get food. So the food is a challenge. So good people, as a community leader in Mamelodi, we were trying to organize all the residents there. There was a land whereby there was a plot, there was a plan, there was a borgat and everything there. So we tried to organize a community there to go that side to plant, especially in that COVID time in 2020, in the COVID time. So we get disappointed, especially if we approach the Department of Agriculture. They give us a seed, but they don't finish their, sorry?
No, thank you, Mr. Koza. Let me, who else? Prof, I've still noted you. I just want to see if there's any other hands. You want to follow up? Okay, go ahead. You can use mine.
There's a program called Second Chance for someone without metric. So it is open to anyone. It doesn't matter how old you are. And then there's also a program under TVET sectors. So the program is called NCV. It's National NCV, National Certificate in Vocational. So it starts from level 2. So level 2 is like grade 10, and it goes to level 3, it's like grade 11, and then level 4, it's like grade 12. So after completing, that person will be able to have metric. So it takes 3 years to complete the NCV.
Thanks, Kagiso. And I guess that's the point, right? Is that Abuti was talking about access to information. Just in this room, what you have presented is in a minute or two a solution to a question that he's been having for many sleepless nights. And that access to information has all the impact in the quality of life and people's access to, or at least proximity to, accessing opportunities. So we really have to find interesting ways of how we can bridge the information gap. It makes it even more difficult in this context because we live in the digital age, but you can't access the digital product if you don't have electricity. People struggle to charge their phones, data costs are unaffordable, and therefore you make it almost impossible to access information even if you have a device. So that's another thing that we need to talk about is what is the importance of digital and data in the context of the modern South African and global experience. I think hunger is definitely an important one, but when we are trying to build a country and a world where young people need to be competitive, Mr. Koza spoke about the inability to use a computer in 2023. That is a sign of how we continue to fail people within South Africa, and yet we want them to compete in a fourth industrial revolution world. It's just it's madness. So let me, Prof, do you want to just go for it?
Thank you, Tibsa. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, this interaction now where maybe there's a solution to what you're raising is in the room is really where the answer lies. We have to rise ourselves in communities. I look at South Africa, I study many countries, I travel to many countries, and I'll give you some examples. I see what India has done. India is 1,200 million people. 300 million people have risen in the last 30 years. China, you know, is even bigger. China has risen. The people are no longer poor. I think of many, many other countries where if we study them, we find that I went to Indonesia, 220 million people. They are rising. I went to the Philippines now, recently, 100 million people, twice as big as us. They are rising. What is making them succeed? It is the strength of communities. It's that people struggle to find a way to succeed, but they do. The South African economy is, because of its history, has a particular structure. So when we talk about apartheid, we're normally talking about race and colonialism. It's right. But there's another kind of apartheid. And I'll try and describe very quickly what I think that is and why we don't have work. No country should have this amount of unemployment with this amount of wealth. It's crazy. It's outrageous. So what is this other apartheid? The other apartheid is that, as you described, councillors are celebrities. They don't feel responsible to their citizens. Members of parliament, MPLs, MECs, don't feel the heat, the pressure, the need that communities are asking them to solve. They are disconnected. They have jobs. They have cars on the freeway. They are disconnected from the people. That's government. Our government, the government we elected, is disconnected from the needs of our people. Why? The second thing for me is that the business community of South Africa, which I know I've spent 40 years of my life teaching business executives in big companies. The way business thinks about itself is disconnected from the development of our people. That's the history of our country. That's the truth. And so today I spent the whole day with a big mining company that employs 40,000 people, gold mining. And when they talk, and they are transformed, I look at the executives in that room, 200 of them, they would not have been there 30 years ago. Many of their mine bosses, their general managers, their executives are black. And so they've transformed. Standard Bank has transformed. Nedbank has transformed in terms of who is there, but they're still not dealing with our people. And the problem is, I think, that this is our history. In this country, business has been big business. And so it wants to make money for the shareholders. It wants to grow its business. It doesn't start in the morning saying, how can we serve the majority of people? It starts in the morning, how can we serve our customers who have money to pay for our products? And so they're disconnected. I very often fear that even NGOs are disconnected very often. They just become disconnected. So it may be over time, as Rise Mzansi grows, that we have voice to talk to these institutions or to influence them or even maybe to run them. But until then, we have to rise. And so, Tebogo, my answer to you about big business is we all have to work where we can to change their minds, to realize the statistics that Songezo spoke about is not a statistic. These are people's lives, their lived daily experience at every traffic light, in every township. And we have to change this. The only way we will change this, I think, is if we work together. Many South Africans have not figured out that we need each other. We've not figured that out yet. And we have much work to do to build what I saw in all these countries. It's got an academic name. It's called social capital. It means, do people trust each other? Do people know each other? Do people respect each other? Do people like each other? And Mzansi is a place where all of that potential is there. Mzansi is changing. And your generation, I'm Madala, your generation have to going to find what that means. How do we help each other? How do we lift as we rise? So big business is trying to do many things. It's now formed a new partnership with government to improve Transnet and improve Eskom and improve this and improve that. But I can tell you, having worked with government, it's like talking to a wall. It's like talking to a stone. They just don't own the problem. When I look at these countries like India and China, I can think of many others, Yugoslavia under Tito, Venezuela, they've lifted their people. And so the start of what we're here tonight is to hear your thoughts. And I, for one, you've helped me make it specific and concrete. This next generation have to do this work. That's our work.
Thanks, Prof. I summarized the words of Prof in 5 C's. Number 1 is consequence. There's no consequence, Momzans, but by it's there's no rule of law. You've got, a presidential brigade that attacks people on the side of the road, kicks them with size 11 shoes, and that's seen as just normal, There's no consequence. So we have to start building a culture of consequence where lack of delivery and lack of respect has got a consequence. The second is about community. Prof spoke about the fact that to make sure that we lift as we rise. The third one is collaboration. That interchange that happened with Mr. Koza and with Kagiso, that's the collaboration we need to see, and we need to multiply that 1,000,000-fold so that we can lift people out of it. The fourth is consciousness. Consciousness is about the way we see ourselves and the way we see the world. They destroyed, especially Black people, they destroyed women, they're destroying youth in trying to make us believe that we are not worthy. And we have to work on our level of consciousness and understanding our value so that we can start holding them to that consequence, that standard that we deserve. And that last one is context. Mzansi is a very unique country with very interesting stories. And therefore, the solutions that we come up with must be for us, by us. And that's why the generational mission is, as a matter of fact, dependent on young people coming up with those solutions, because we are the biggest shareholders of Mzansi Pty Limited. If you look at the numbers, the most number of people who live on this country's earth, land mass, are young people. And yet they're the most forsaken. So when we understand that context, it becomes important. We spoke about the cost of living. The cost of living is a proxy for something even deeper, which Songezo spoke about. Proxy, a bigger story about something else, which is actually happiness and well-being. If we take out all the English, what people really want is happiness and well-being. And cost of living describes the impediments in front of us from getting to that happiness and well-being. So it's important that we think about that. And then women are a proxy for quality of life. If you want to understand what is actually the lived experience of most South Africans, it's through the eyes of women, but most importantly, Black women. and Black women living with disabilities. That is where you'll understand how bad things can get when things fail. So I just wanted to summarize that and some of the points that were shared earlier. But let's keep it flowing. Are there any more questions, contributions? Yes, please. Noted.
Although I don't speak on behalf of UNISA, I want to ask you, as Rais Mzansi, where do you stand with respect to SASA? Because SASA is a huge presence in South Africa. How many million of people are dependent on SASA? And how many people become dependent because of SASA? Are start to define themselves essentially as recipients, passive recipients very often. And because I'd received money from SASA, I don't have to work. So I think for your purposes, I'm in political science at UNISA, so that's why I'm talking like this, is how will you as a party ultimately go to approach SASA as an institution of society? Is it the way in which it is presented now as a sort of a relief measure almost? Or can it become a developmental agent? At the moment, it's not developmental in nature. It is much more of dealing with emergencies almost. But it becomes bigger and it becomes also politically exploited because it's seen as a government mechanism and government benefits from it. So there's actually very little motivation to change it because they benefit so much from it politically speaking. So I think there's a challenge coming from society and people who are not necessarily beneficiaries of SASA now because they are dependent on it, of to say, but this is unsustainable for the future, the SASA sort of approach. So what will be your approach as a party for the future? The billions are there, but how to convert it into something which will make a much more of an impact on society in general. Then another point is about you I'm coming, as I said, from from a university. We see that the current way in which education is structured is not producing the optimum results. At the moment, the objective of most people is to go to university. And that's the ambition, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. While the options for society in general have actually been reduced since 1994. The nursing training colleges have been closed. The educational teachers training colleges were closed. Many of the agricultural colleges were closed. The agricultural schools are not there. Some of the technicons were closed, were merged with universities. So today, the options for anyone to try to go to have any form of education is essentially either university or TVET college. And because of those limitations and the costs of that, that results in the end of how many of South Africans are directly benefiting from education after school is very small. Well, I believe that what we are talking about tonight here is in the first instance, the current crisis. Now, education is not going to immediately alleviate the current cost of living and socioeconomic crisis. But I think one has to accept that, yes, and there must be many opportunities or approaches of how to deal with the immediate crisis. But what is the longer term perspective? And I think from my point of view at a university, it starts with education and training. So what I would like to see that as part of the agenda of talking about is how to develop a new paradigm in terms of education and training, to make it much more accessible, to make it cheaper, to make it speaking more to the different needs that exist in society. Many people start to see education as elitist. You go to someone talked about private education, private schools, and those that, or universities, which are expensive. We need to start to look at different layers of training and education that will make it much more accessible. There's a challenge for you as a party. Many parties, well, several parties, start to have initiatives of their own. They have, for example, leadership training programs, leadership academies maybe. Why not you? Because what it means is that you can develop a cohort of persons who are not necessarily going to go up in the ranks in your party, but they can use those skills that they've learned there for other purposes in society. And they can say, but we went through the process with you. You can take it further. I listened to some of the projects that people are involved with. Why can you as a party not become involved in some of those projects? Because the question is, parties are now have a very low level of trust, or the society's trust in political parties are low. Why? Because you just come to us when you need the vote. In between that 5 years, you hardly see the party. So what it means is that I would say for you to change the paradigm of political parties, you will have to say, we are going to work for you throughout the 5 years of the term until the next election. Now, how do you do that? And I think that is the question that you must start to think about, which means it's not the traditional political type of activities. But some of these projects that are in Soshanguve and so on, why don't you become involved in some of those? Or assist with some of the people with expertise that's in the party to start to become involved in that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You were noted, Abuti. Noted, Mitchell. Just in front of you, Mitchell. I'm sorry, Calvin.
Oh, evening, everyone. I'm Bernard Mashavela. I'm also with Soshanguve Youth Business Forum. I'm from Soshanguve. I just want to touch on 4 points. Firstly, we need to bring back the spirit of Ubuntu because people don't want to help each other anymore, whether rich or poor. A rich person will tell you, I'm not helping people because I pay too much tax and the government is stealing money. And a poor person will tell you, I can't help people because either they will rob me or they will steal from me after that. So we really need to bring back the spirit of Ubuntu so that people can start helping each other. Number two, I don't understand why South Africa is so behind, but we only work 8 hours a day. Like, why are we wasting 16 hours every day? Why can't we work at least 16 and then sleep 8? Because people knock off at 4 and then the company can still be open for another shift to come in, which will also solve the employment crisis. Meaning for every person, there will be 2 people doing that post. But I also think it's because of crime. They will tell you people can work at night because of crime, of which we have a solution for that. We need to solve our security issue. We cannot not want to make money or not know how to make money because of crime. We need to solve that issue as well. I'm going to go into lifestyle. The reason the youth is doing what it's doing is because of the lifestyle we sold them. If you go on TV, on their social media, the lifestyle they see is drinking, nice clothes, nice cars. They don't know any other lifestyle. So if that's the only thing they see, that's what they will want. That's why it's so hard to bring them to the culture of entrepreneurship. They don't even know it. It's something foreign to them. So we need to control what our youth see or what they learn from the young age. So we need to limit what they see. Going back to the spirit of Ubuntu, By the way, it's Women's Month. Congratulations. Or Happy Women's Month, I mean to say, to women. We need to appreciate our women in South Africa. I don't think we appreciate women enough. I was telling someone the other day that if I have 6 kids and my friend tells me I'm throwing a party in Paris, I can just pack my bag and go. I'm not a woman, but I have 6 kids. For a woman, she'll have to find a babysitter, do this. These people, they bath our kids, make sure they go to school, make sure that they can keep our children safe so we can hustle. If we can appreciate each other, I think we'll also respect each other. And also the JBV can be maybe reduced or solved. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. I'm going to take Mitchell and then we're going to draw to a close. I'm just looking at time. We are at 19:47 and we wanted to stop at 8 p.m., maybe slightly over. So I just want to also offer Songezo to make some closing remarks. And I know that our national chair will also just want to respond to some of the questions. So before you stand, Mitchell, after Mitchell, are there any other questions that anybody would like to ask? Okay, we will take your hand. Anybody else? We'll take your hand. Anyone else? Okay, those are the last 3 contributions, then we'll bring it to a close. Please keep it straight, brief, and as clear as possible. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, straight and brief are things I don't do well, but I'll try. So, guys, let's be honest about context. We want to talk about the South African economy in isolation, and that's not possible. We have a cost of living crisis locally that is 100% true. So does America, so does England, so do most of the big countries that have a similar economic makeup to what we do, at least how the system functions. And did you know that since 2020, the compensation packages of the executives of the 500 most valuable companies in the world have doubled, while the rest of the world has fallen into a cost of living crisis? Now, that sounds very abstract, right? But that includes companies like Unilever. Now, it doesn't matter if you're using Skip or Omo or any of the detergents that you are using to wash your clothes at home that form part of that cost of living every month. Those are owned by 2 or 3 companies, and those 2 or 3 companies are not owned by South Africans. If you go down the sweets aisle in a Checkers, in a Pick n Pay, there's 2 companies. You've got 150 different brands in front of you. You've got 1,000 different sweets to choose from. There's Mondelez and there's Nestle in that aisle. Neither of them owned by South Africans. So when we're talking about food production and when we're talking about food and agriculture, there is a global context to take into account about where our food comes from and how we grow our food. This touches on things like agriculture, which I personally believe should form part of the basic education curriculum in South Africa. People should be taught how to grow their own food and empowered with cheap access to things like wheelbarrows, spades, and good access to water. But there's another problem, which is the problem of seed. I was doing a little bit of research just now. South Africa has a $5.5 billion trade surplus on the export of agricultural goods. That means that we export around 110 billion rand worth of food per year, right? While we've got families who are choosing to kill that themselves and their family because they believe that, or because they are suffering from not having food at home. Now, there's an institute in Pietermaritzburg that has a look at what the cost of a basket of food is to feed a family of 4 for a month. Depending on where you are in the country, it's somewhere between 4,900 rand and about 5,100 rand. So in pure rand value, we are exporting out of our country enough food to feed 20 million families. 20 million families. That number doesn't make sense to me. Just the idea of the cost of living barely makes sense to me. It was a silly thing I heard once, but we are the only creatures on God's green earth that pay to live on this planet at base. And I understand that business, the production of goods, paying employees, how we organize things, people have to be paid. There has to be money moving around in the system. But there is an evil at the base of this world that we haven't mentioned once. And it is greed and it is profit. There are people making money in South Africa today either in South Africa as South Africans with big, big companies, and then they are choosing profit prioritization over, as you said, trying to actually lift the boat and help people in South Africa. And then there are these international players who, without crossing the line into hardcore blasphemy, these people have more money than God. They can do what they want. They are laws unto themselves. And we must recognize that the cost of living has a lot of victims, but it also has a lot of beneficiaries. So we must be honest that there is that other side of this equation that we're not mentioning, that we do have to tackle the problem of greed and the problem of pure seeking money for money's sake in this world. It is killing our people, it is killing our families, and it is killing the environment on which each of us depends, and which every life that will ever come after us will depend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thank you very much. We can just pass the mic to, oh, there we go.
Okay, let me just stand here so I don't have my back. Yeah, thanks for mentioning greed, because like greedflation is real. I mean, and this whole global capital.
Sorry, your name?
Oh, sorry. It's Aziza Rangunwala. I'm from an organization called Groundwork. It's an environmental justice organization. I speak on behalf of myself, though. Yeah, so the greedflation thing, we've also seen over COVID where companies were telling people, oh, we can't give anyone raises, we have to do these job cuts. And pharmaceutical companies later said, oh, look, record profits. So record profits, they said, are unpaid wages. And this new slavery system in South Africa is interesting because solving unemployment doesn't solve the housing crisis. You know, solving unemployment doesn't even solve hunger, for example, because we're saying people paying to get to work and they're paying to get home. And once they're home, they can't afford groceries because the cost of living is so high. And mentioning things like big business is interesting because who has to regulate big business? It's government. Governments have to tell big businesses, hey, what you're doing is wrong. I'm going to use a very privileged example, like in Brazil, where iPhone stopped selling the charger with the phone. And Brazil said, no, include that charger in the phone. I mean, it's a really small example, but our governments need to start standing up to big business. But like you say, people with money and, you know, they don't care about the laws. That's why things can happen on sides of the road where you are bullied off the road and no one is held accountable. But anyway, my questions are mostly about interesting mention about apathy, like voter apathy and the trust in the political system. A lot of people I speak to are like, how do we know that once Rise Mzansi actually rises, that the leaders won't become sellouts? You know, everyone is scared about sellouts in the movement. And how do we ensure this cohesive leadership of not selling a certain lifestyle and a certain way of wanting to be a celebrity, but actually being the invisible fairy that makes the change? And the invisible fairies are usually women. Unpaid care work is usually done by women. I mean, that's the care economy on its own is what's holding South Africa. I mean, our president called us resilient. Resilient is really like, why should we be resilient when we are living in a really wealthy country? South Africa is not poor, it just has poor leadership. You know, so why can't, we have so much more to prosper and we have so much hope, and building these communities and hearing from, the community activists here, there's people who are still trying to do things for their communities despite living in an extremely violent country. And we must remember that we are living in we're all traumatized. I mean, our parents lived through the trauma of apartheid. Some of us were born in it as well. And what I remembered from 2024 is our 1994 is that the born frees are turning 30 next year. 30 years old, you are an adult, a real adult. But we are earning more than our parents. Our parents had to live through apartheid, yet we can't afford houses, So how is this even like, it's not computing. They call it the shifting goalpost, the disappearing middle class. And we actually, living on this ticking time bomb that is South Africa. And if we can rise in the same way that, look at the looting showed you how much hunger is happening right now. A lot of times we don't see the hunger. It's shown as statistics. But at the end of the day, when COVID struck and there was no toilet paper on the shelves, it's not the people who needed it that bought it. And there are people that are still not even using toilet paper today because they can't afford toilet paper, something so basic as toilet paper. And there's a missing dignity in South Africa, and we need to restore people's dignity. And dignity starts with a toilet. A pit toilet in 2024 is unacceptable. I mean, 2023 already, but I mean next year. It's really unacceptable. Even hunger, the fact that someone had to kill their children and kill themselves because of hunger, because there's no way out. There's an air of desperation. And the problem with desperation is even the rich are desperate because it's the greed, just making more and more money and hoarding wealth, and also evading tax. There's money being shifted out of this country. If we have a minimum wage, why is there no maximum wage? In the most unequal country in the world, we need a maximum wage because there are people benefiting from this country. There are people sitting in America living off profits made in South Africa from mining. So yeah, there's just such a few random reflections. And yeah, what I would like to hear your thoughts about, we can afford universal basic income. What are your thoughts about it? And also about having people who are active in the economy and the social protection not being a thing of, well, we don't have to do anything. We still have to do things. So yeah, thank you for today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aziza. I think there was the last one just here in front. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sipiwe Koga from an organization called Watupanda Community Forum. I think she has touched on mostly the things that I wanted to say, but I just want to say something concerning what the government has to look into in terms of the services we shouldn't be actually paying for. If I'm a young person from a family that is not, it's having a lot of people who's unemployed, and I'm looking for a job, firstly, to go even to an internet cafe to print out a CV is costly. And after I get that job, to be called for an interview, I can't even go there because I can't afford to go there. And after again I get the job, I still have to borrow money to even pitch for my job. So I think the poor people will always be poorer. I think the government must look into sponsoring people, the young people, with free facilities like internet cafes and transport to take us to places where we should be getting to. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Vuisa, do you want to go and then hand over to Songezo, or you want Songezo to? Oh, you'll close. Okay, cool. Songs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for those contributions. So I'm going to try and I won't respond directly to everything, but action is important. And action not later, but now. So that the political organizing is not just about vote for us next year. It is about what we can do now and in between elections. Now, there is something that has happened in South Africa, which is that the politics is about political parties promising to do things for people, and the people must wait for those things to happen and see, and maybe they'll happen in 5 years. That does not work. I think we know that that does not work. The question, therefore, is what kind of politics enables us to agitate and do some of the things we want to do? So I think that is important as a principle. So I'm just going to pose a few suggestions because we spoke earlier about targeting very specific problems. And we say this is a policy gathering. And we've decided to have these conversations across the country so that we can get to a point where when we say we have policies, they target very specific problems. I think we can agree that food is an issue in South Africa, and that we must make an undertaking that one way or another, not in one generation, which is 20 to 25 years, but within 5 years, every family must have 3 full meals a day. 3 full meals a day, at least every family. So that is something we must politically undertake to make sure that it happens. If you can't solve food, you can't solve anything else. You have to solve food. You really have to solve food. The how involves a few other things. We have to think about what we do now about the people that are starving. And Derek, I'm going to come to SASA in that context and in the context of other things that we spoke about today. But food is important. That says to me the next thing that's important, apart from government assistance, and we can talk about how that happens, it means water is important. Not just access to clean water to drink, but for people to be able to produce their own food. So in many villages, and I think many of us have some experience of villages, people have got some land, certainly enough land to produce their own food for themselves. The difficulty is having to go down to the river to fetch water yourself in order to water those plants. It is the knowledge to produce that food and so on. So water is a basic necessity. So every home, not a communal tap, every home must have water, every single home. So let's make that political undertaking. So we've had the discussion here today. Water is important for many reasons, including drinking, but every home must have water. There is a reason why water then becomes important. Because if you put water in every home, that training that Derek was talking about, for instance, artisan training and so on, you can now become a plumber. We have FET colleges that teach people how to be plumbers in areas where there's not enough piped water to every home. So what are they going to do? So by solving the basic necessities, investing in the basic necessities, we begin to solve the opportunity for people to get training and for people to work and people to feed themselves. So let's make that as a political undertaking. So that is the second thing. The third thing, I just want to also address an issue. My experience, Derek, of social grants is that they're actually not enough for people to survive on. They are nothing. One of the reasons I mentioned that statistic about how much people need to live a decent life is because a social grant is not even a quarter of it. People are so desperate, they appreciate the little bit of help they get. They resent that they rely on them. Because people want to have dignity. I think everybody who spoke here spoke about how they want to do things for themselves and not get a handout from the government and be dependent on the government. I believe that if we think about public services differently, so let me put it to you this way. See, the problem with a social grant for me, and I'm talking to everyone, problem with a social grant is you get given a little bit of money in the context of a system that is still expensive, right? We must have public transport that is affordable, right? But if you don't have a job, you get a voucher to at least go to town and look for work and come back home without having to pay. And the public transport is owned by whom? By the government, by the South African people. Now you begin to solve the cost problem. Otherwise, you don't get to solve the cost problem. So let us think about all the things that the government or the state should make sure they're available so that people can have a decent life and not have to spend so much money. That's a society we want to be able to build. People who don't have money should not have to pay for medication. If you can't look after sick people, then what are you doing? There's a few things that Aziza said, which I really liked. So we do need a maximum wage. There are countries where it's not exactly legislated, but morally it's not acceptable. So in the US, you can earn as much as you want, but you hardly hear about Swedish and German CEOs earning the kind of monies that American CEOs do. And in South Africa as well, it's a almost completely unregulated thing. So there is no Gini coefficient between the lowest paid person and the highest paid person within the same company. It's not used as a measure at all. So can we make a political undertaking again that the measure of success for chief executives and for companies must have to do with general well-being of their workers and of the societies and customers they serve? And part of that is charging fair pricing. Because part of what happened during COVID is that because of the scarcity, the prices went up in some instances where it was not even necessary. So there's some things that we can do though in the short term for ourselves, and sharing knowledge so that people know how to do things for themselves. It's something that Rise Mzansi should be able to do. So let's work on that, leaders. Let's work on that. It's not just the knowledge about how to apply for a job. Let's find people, and we will find those people who can also do entrepreneurship training and so on. Because sometimes people just don't know how to access things because the information is not available. Now, if one of those obstacles is that people don't have basic computer skills, let's see how we can agitate for that to become available. Because if you get that, that dependency on government assistance becomes less, and you begin to claim your dignity back as a person. So what I'm trying to say is, let us think about the things that we can do together. I also want to say, there is something that we all forget, myself included. Okay, maybe not all of us, but many of us, I believe. And that is the responsibility to do things in a way that preserves the earth, the environment. It's become clearer to me because I have a 6-year-old child. And now you think, if it's too hot now already, like when this child is 40 years old, how hot will it be? As an example. Or even our very ability to produce food for ourselves and for everyone. I also want to touch in the context of food on something that Mitchell said. The role of politics is to create an environment and rules that work for everyone. So South Africa is a net exporter of food. So theoretically, we produce enough food to feed everyone, and then we export some of it. Clearly, that is not true because we've got people who kill themselves because they are hungry. The job of a government is to say, what kind of rules do we create to make sure that local needs are met so that we really do export a surplus? There is pricing where we get charged export pricing, even though we're here in South Africa and so on. But some of the things we must do in closing is that we must also solve the underlying issues, because if a farmer needs a diesel pump, this is the problem with a government that is corrupt and is collapsing. If a farmer can afford a diesel engine to pump water, the problem is Umgebe, who is in the village, cannot afford a diesel engine to feed themselves. This is the problem. So we've also got to think about what appropriate solutions look like. Maybe we have solar-powered boreholes or something of the sort, so that people can continue to be able to live for themselves. I'm not going to be able to go through everything. All I want to ask for those who are part of Rise Mzansi or those who are contemplating being part of what we do, can we think about solutions in that way? But what is really important, everybody who comes from an organization here, let's make it part of our organizing to find solutions now around the issues that you raised. Around the issues that you raised. Because human solidarity is very important. Let us work together on those things. Even if they're small things, let's start somewhere together and find people who don't come from the areas in which you are, who've got skills and other experience that you don't have, so that when they leave, you've got the same kind of knowledge that they had when you that they brought in. And we continue to organize around that way. We solve problems now. We do political organizing, and eventually we have the kind of government that we want. And that kind of government is sitting here in the room. That government is sitting here in the room, because the government is nothing without the people. So it is the people. We say what? We say we, the people, shall govern. And governing is just about making choices. and making sure that those choices are realized and they are realized in the best way possible. Leaders, thank you very much. I will hand over to our chair.
Thank you, Songezo. So just a few announcements because when Vuisa comes up, she will wrap up on behalf of all of us. I do have parking tickets here, so if you did drive and you need access to at least to exit, we've got parking tickets. And if you can just make sure that you've completed the register. I think there are just a few points, if I may, that were raised as a concern. One of the concerns was around the academy. I think this was Mr. Kutsia who raised this. It is something that we are working on. The likes of Prof. Pinedal, who's in the room, and Dr. Ishmael Mkabela, and many others in the RISE ecosystem are working on building that capability for internal capacity building, but also for broader community development. So it is a program that is part of our planning. That will be executed over a series of months to come. So it's definitely on the cards. There is this concern that Aziza raised that there's the risk of sellouts. When we started this journey, many of us came from a world that was not of political orientation. We came from business, from civil society, from academia. I, for one, was working in one of the big insurance firms. I'm here because I choose to be here. And the fear of selling out, it would be because I am trying to attach myself to this as a political project that is supposed to sustain my livelihood. I can do many other things, but I choose to be here because I believe in this mission. And I believe there's no better place to be than to change the context within which one can build wealth, irrespective of how rich you can be. And my colleagues in this room and our colleagues in the National Leadership Collective and in the provincial structures come from the same space. They are making a choice to be here because they believe in the work that we do. And I think that's going to bind us differently to those who have to do this because they depend on the monies of government to do this. So I just wanted to share that as a perspective of what type of leadership you can expect. The people who sit here are people of high regard in the spaces they come from. And if you just look up, even in the provincial structures where people come from, track record is a very important part of the importance of what type of leaders we want to be part of Rise Mzansi. And I think that is going to be a key proxy for whether or not people will deviate and do things that are wrong. But the human condition is an interesting one, and we can never talk in absolute terms. Yeah, those were just some of the outstanding questions that were raised. The K economy sits at the cornerstone of the work we'll be doing. Civil society has a dedicated function within the National Leadership Collective. So when you talk about the K economy, when you talk about how are we going to build capacity, it's not about Rise Mzansi doing all the work. There are people who have been doing tremendous work in civil society and in NGOs. It's about partnering effectively and leveraging that so that they're not just firefighters, but they get elevated to strategic positions in society where they can do the work instead of policing government. And I think that's the work that Rise Mzansi wants to do in unleashing that potential. So that's my contribution. We will be around a little further. If we didn't answer your questions or if you have any concerns, please come and have a chat with us. But that's it from me this evening. I'll hand over to Vuiswa, who will wrap up and just give a message of thank you and just an idea of what you can expect going forward. Thanks.
Good evening, leaders. Dumelan, thank you. Hey, I know it's late to be greeting people, but my apologies for arriving a little bit late. I've just been tasked with giving a few closing remarks. But before I do so, I actually would like to just take a moment to recognize our brothers from across the ocean, our leaders from the Black Male Initiative from BMI. If you could just stand for a moment. These are our brothers who have flown in from Atlanta. They are involved in doing a lot of important political work, grassroots organizing, and supporting progressive candidates in the USA. They have found resonance with our movement and have pledged their support for Rise Mzansi and the movement, and are working directly with our organizers and volunteers, training and capacitating, and we are learning so much from them, and they're doing this all on their own ticket. So we really thank you and appreciate you for even making it here tonight. So we have discussed a lot of difficult topics, and it was never going to be an easy discussion. The cost of living is one that affects all of us in some shape or form. You know, there is often a sense, an impression that is given that the only people who are bearing the brunt of the political recklessness and uncaringness that we've experienced are the so-called poorest of the poor, and that everybody else is just fine. No, the middle class are fine, they don't care. The rich people are happy, they don't care. It's only the poorest of the poor. And indeed, the problems that affect us as a country affect those who have nothing the most. But let's not make a mistake and think that other people are okay. We are all in the same boat. And the issues that affect us all, of course, in different ways. You know, they say that there's no such thing as middle class in South Africa. Most people are one paycheck away from poverty. That is a reality. Most people are living on credit. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck. This thing of people spending, we talked about people who take the little bit they have and they spend it on fun, alcohol, drugs, whatever. That comes from a mindset of scarcity. Because if you don't know what tomorrow holds, you may as well spend it all today. And you may as well grab whatever little bit of joy that you can get today. And so even for those people, we can't judge them. This is a function of a society that has failed to show people that there is a tomorrow, that there is something worth living for, something worth hoping for. But I'm inspired by the conversations actually that have happened tonight. I'm inspired by the fact that you are all here, you all came, no one was paid to be here tonight. You cared enough about this country and about the work that needs to be done to show up. And just your being here tells me that there is something worth fighting for, that all hope is not lost. And in fact, even though our problems may seem insurmountable, there are enough of us who are willing and able and ready to do something about it. And that's the most important thing. That little spark is the most important thing, because that change, that mass movement change we want to see, it starts with one person. 6 months ago, 8 months ago, Rise Mzansi was an idea. Today we exist in 9 provinces. We have field organizers, volunteers, waking up every day. Not people who aren't even earning a cent from doing this work, but wake up, put on our t-shirts, and inspire other people to have hope and inspire other people to rise. That means something, and we mustn't take it for granted. So we talked a lot about inequality this evening, and I think that's a huge topic. That's actually probably one of the biggest crises that we face as a country. Besides the cost of living is there, but you know, to the point that Mitchell made, the inequality, we could boost GDP and do all of these things if we do that in a system that we currently have, where the rich are only getting richer and the poor are only getting poorer. We don't move forward as a society. And unfortunately, the thing with inequality is that it's not only a financial issue, it divides us socially, emotionally. It creates different lived experiences. We cannot build a nation where people are living literally in different countries. If you live in Sandton, you live in a first world country. If you are currently living in Song's home village, Mkanduli, you are living in a third world country. There are very few countries that can say they have a first world and a third world experience any given day in one country. And that, in my opinion, needs to be our biggest mission as a generation. Whilst we lifting as we rise means making sure that we close that inequality gap. We are able to build a society that is equal, that is prosperous, that is safe and united in one generation. It cannot take us another 100 years. We don't have the time. And that's going to require every single one of us to leave today with a very clear idea of what we in our individual capacities are going to do to make sure that that happens. That's why we have these events. We don't have them so we can stand on stages and talk. We have them so that we can hear from you what needs to be done, how are you going to do it, and what can Rise Mzansi do to help support that work that you're doing. And support means many different things. You know, we've got people all over who want to work together. Like, you know, what happened tonight? We've got people who've got ideas. We've got people who have skills. We have it actually, and it's all here, and it's in this room, and it's in many other rooms in our country. So I'd like to thank you all really just for coming. I'd like to say that you know, this is but one of many events that we are going to have over the next couple of months. I'm not sure if Debs mentioned. We have the People's Convention, which will be coming up towards the end of September. So in the last few months, we have been hosting a series of conversations at all levels of society. We've been engaging with community forums, business organizations, women's organizations, big business, small business, faith-based organizations from all different faiths, environmental activists. We are traversing the length and breadth of this country to capture the aspirations of South Africans all over. You know, and this is important because it helps us to craft a vision. Vision actually is an interesting word that I often think about, because vision is both what you can see with your eyes, like your eyesight, but it's also the same word for what you can see in your mind. Because that's where it starts. Vision starts in your mind. We need to imagine this world we want to live in. We need to imagine waking up every morning, every South African waking up in a warm bed, every South African having a hot meal when they wake up in the morning. We need to imagine every South African being able to take cheap, affordable public transport. If we can imagine it, we can make it happen. So a big part of what we are trying to do here is craft a vision. And I want to challenge you to go back to where you come from and not allow the despondency and the fatigue and the, you know, the just, we're all over it. And it's so easy to lose hope. But I'm encouraging you to go back to where you come from and remind everyone where you come from that there is hope. And the only way we get to where we want to get to, the only way we realize our vision is if we create it together. So thank you again for coming this evening. Thank you, Songezo, for your leadership. I think this platform is a function of this, you know, the culture you've created within Rise. Rise is a bottom-up organization. We believe that the people truly are the politics, not the politicians. The politicians are not the politics. The people are the politics. And I thank you for that. And I thank you all for availing yourselves this evening and for being part of this journey.
Yeah, I suspect, thank you, National Chair. I suspect there's foods and refreshments outside. Please help yourselves. There's plenty to go around. We've spoken about hunger today. It would be a grave, grave disappointment if we leave all this food unattended. But where it is not eaten, we will make sure it gets to the right places as well. Again, parking tickets are available. If you need one, please sign the register. And then lastly, to our online community, we want to thank you for being part of the conversation. Apologies that we couldn't engage with you as well as we could have, but we'll certainly improve in that regard. But thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and see you soon. Bye.